What is up, Mizzou fans? Welcome back to another video on my channel. My name is Josh Fan of ShowMeFootball.com, covering your Missouri Tigers. And today I wanted to make a video discussing where exactly the Missouri Tigers are at in their search for a transfer portal quarterback. So obviously, Mizzou missed out on USC transfer quarterback Miller Moss. He ended up committing to Louisville over Mizzou, and that left a lot of people really disappointed and also concerned about whether or not Eli Drinkwitz would be able to land a transfer quarterback that is actually going to be a viable starter for next season. And while I am also myself concerned about Drinkwitz's ability to land a transfer portal quarterback, Miller Moss is simply only one quarterback, and he's also not even the best quarterback in the transfer portal right now. He was just the first one to actually visit Mizzou, and anytime you get a guy visit that you clearly are targeting as your guy and you don't get him, yeah, people are going to be disappointed. But just because Miller Moss was the first guy to visit doesn't mean that he was the best possible option. But that's just kind of how transfer portal recruiting works. If you see a guy jump into the portal and you think he's a good fit and you like him, then you have to get him on campus, or else if you wait too long and try to hold out for a bigger name, then you might get left in the dust and end up with nobody. And Mizzou thought that Miller Moss was good enough to get him on campus quickly and try to get him to commit. It didn't work, but there's still plenty of quarterback options left on the board, and we're going to talk about a few of them in this video. So let's start with the first option, and where I think Mizzou is pivoting now. Clearly option A, and who everyone on social media wants now that Miller Moss is off the board, and that's going to be Cal transfer quarterback Fernando Mendoza. Mendoza is better than Miller Moss in my opinion. I mean, first of all, he's a lot more mobile and a more explosive athlete than Miller Moss. Miller Moss doesn't really bring you a running threat, and a lot of people think that the Mizzou offense would be best if they had a mobile quarterback that just opens up more of the offense when you have a quarterback that can run and is a threat in RPO, all that stuff. Fernando Mendoza is certainly a lot better than Miller Moss in that regard, but he also has a really good arm. And if you look at his 2 seasons at Cal, he completed 63% of his passes, and then in 2024, he completed 68.7% of his passes, threw for over 3,000 yards and 16 touchdowns, and only 6 interceptions. I mean, this is someone that I think has NFL upside, and he also didn't get benched for his team. Miller Moss got benched at USC, and they went 500 this year. Not saying I wouldn't have taken Miller Moss, because I think, there's always something attached to these transfer quarterbacks as to why they're transferring in the first place. It didn't work out for Miller Moss at USC. That doesn't mean it can't work out somewhere else, and I actually think he'll be really successful at Louisville. So I would have been ecstatic about Miller Moss, but Mendoza, I think, is the best option. It's just he wasn't actually in the transfer portal until after Miller Moss had already scheduled his visit to Mizzou. But this is clearly option A at this point. I think he's the best guy you could get. He's got 2 years of eligibility left, which I think is a good place to be at with the transfer quarterback that you would bring in, someone that has 2 more years of eligibility. They could leave for the draft after next year, or potentially come back for 1 more year, and then, Matt Zollers or whoever takes over in 2027. I think if you were to land him, he would be immediately one of the top quarterbacks in the SEC. He would put Mizzou in a really good place to compete for the college football playoff next year. I think they'd be a popular pick, actually, and I think unlike Brady Cook, Fernando Mendoza actually gives these weapons a chance to make a play downfield, and he'd utilize these weapons much better. And I also think he's a better runner than Brady Cook. Like, Brady Cook had decent athleticism and straight line speed, but I wouldn't call him a good running quarterback. I mean, he was good when he had to scramble, but Fernando Mendoza is much more of a legitimate threat to actually take off and run with the football, in my opinion. And I do think the designed quarterback runs would work a lot better with him than they did with Brady Cook. I mean, there's not too much more to say with Mendoza. He'd be the best option. I think he's got the best arm out of all the quarterbacks that Mizzou has either been reported to be looking at or is considering. He's a good runner. He's an NFL prospect. The question just is, how realistic of a target is he for Mizzou? He is reportedly already visiting Indiana, where his younger brother already is a quarterback on their roster. Now, This seems a little strange to me because, I mean, it makes sense why Indiana is a threat to get him with his brother being there, but at the same time, his brother also plays quarterback, so I don't know if Mendoza would want to go there and essentially block his younger brother from playing time. Miami seems to be in on John Mateer. They were the other school rumored to be in on Mendoza, but if they're going after Mateer, then I would think you could get Mendoza a little bit more easily. And then Georgia, maybe they could be in on him. But this is someone that if Mizzou could get on campus for a visit, that would be a great start. So we'll see what happens on the Fernando Mendoza front in the coming days. But that is clearly option A right now for the Tigers. And then the next quarterback I would be taking a look at, and not as many people are as big of a fan of this one as I personally am, but Duke quarterback Malik Murphy, who set the school record this past season at Duke for touchdown passes, was at Texas the year before, transferred to Duke after Riley Leonard left for Notre Dame, and he actually had a really good season for the Blue Devils. He only completed 60% of his passes, but he threw for 2,933 yards and 26 touchdowns. And I also think it's worth noting that Duke's leading wide receiver this year was a quarterback converted to wide receiver. So it's not like he necessarily had the best weapons. I actually tried to do a little bit of a deep dive to see how many dropped passes the Duke wide receiver room had because that completion percentage seemed really low for a quarterback like Malik Murphy, who I thought looked really good in the games that I did see. He's got arm talent. He throws a really beautiful deep ball. So I think, he's a threat to attack the sidelines, utilize, again, the weapons on this team, kind of like I said about Fernando Mendoza. And, yeah, he scored a lot of touchdowns for Duke, and that sounds good to me. Now, here's the thing, though, with him. People aren't really as big of a fan of him, one, because of the completion percentage, but also because he had one of the worst passer ratings under pressure this year at Duke. So he's not a quarterback that does very well when pressured, and he's not very mobile. That said, I still feel like there's some untapped potential there, and there's some development that could be done there with the coaches to get him to a point where he's a little bit better under pressure and he's completing more of his passes, because I believe I read that he's only played football since his junior year of high school. Not only is he new to the quarterback position, but he's new to the sport as a whole. And I just think that there's something here. There's a lot of talent there. I mean, he set the school record in touchdown passes, and he was arguably better than Riley Leonard was last year for them, just as far as production goes. So I like him a lot. I think there's untapped potential there. I think if you get him in here working with Kirby Moore and Eli Drinkwitz, they could design the offense to best suit his strengths and weaknesses to where he's completing more of his passes and he's not, under duress so often. I like him. I don't know what else to say. I like Malik Murphy. I like the arm talent. I think there's potential here. I think there's a higher ceiling that hasn't quite been reached yet. So I think you could do a lot worse than him. I would not be upset at all if he was the guy. So count me in on Malik Murphy if they miss out on Fernando Mendoza. And then the last guy that would be an intriguing option for Mizzou at quarterback after missing out on Miller Moss is Penn State transfer quarterback Beau Pribula. And Beau Pribula just entered the portal the other day. Penn State is in the playoffs, but unfortunately, because of the way the system is designed, Pribula has to leave his team now in order to find a spot. He wants to play. He wants to be the starter somewhere. But if you enter the portal so late, most of these schools already have the spot filled. So Pribula thought it was best for him to enter the portal, and I respect that decision. And it sounds like head coach James Franklin also respects the decision as well. It's just the unfortunate way that the system is designed that a player has to make this decision and leave his team. But On3 says that Mizzou is an early team to watch for Pribula. And I've warmed up to this idea a lot. When I first saw him enter the portal, didn't think much of it. But then there was a lot of talk among fans about potentially going after him, especially if you miss out on Mendoza. Again, Mendoza is still option A, but if you don't get him, Pribula is very intriguing to me. So he actually played quite a bit this past year, even though Drew Aller is clearly their starter. They use Pribula a lot in specific packages, and he will have his own drives in which he's the quarterback. So we've seen enough of him where he's not a complete unknown, but we don't really know what his ceiling is. But it makes for a really intriguing option. I think there's a bit of an unknown yet still pretty high ceiling with him. I'd still be pretty excited if he was our quarterback going into next year. I just think there's an element of excitement there with a quarterback like Beau Pribula, who has a lot of athleticism, is an explosive athlete, can really run the football, and that's the main allure with him compared to a lot of the other options. He's a really good running quarterback. He's a physical runner, almost runs like a running back in the open field, not afraid to take a hit, absorbs contact pretty well. This isn't someone that got injured a lot like Brady Cook, and I think that is worth noting. But he's the biggest threat when running RPOs, and I just like to imagine, if he is the guy from Mizzou and Drinkwitz is able to land a proven portal running back, Mizzou could be pretty damn dangerous running RPO with Pribula and whoever they bring in, whether that's Kanye Udo or Ahmad Hardy, who are both visiting this week. Both of them ran for over 1,000 yards last year. So I'm just dreaming the RPOs that Mizzou could run in that scenario. But he's also no slouch throwing the football either. I'm not quite sure how strong of an arm he has. I don't think he has an NFL arm. But in the games that I saw, he has pretty damn good accuracy. He made some tight window throws. He only attempted 35 passes this past season, but he completed 74% of them. And he has 9 touchdown passes over the last 2 seasons in very limited playing time again. And this was not someone that came in specifically to run the football. When Penn State put him in the game, they had specific packages for him and they had games in which they utilized him a lot, but it wasn't only to run the football. This was not someone that Penn State was terrified if he dropped back to throw. Like, he actually looks pretty poised. I think he has actually pretty polished footwork, and it allows him to throw with pinpoint accuracy on short to intermediate throws. And I think that's just the kind of guy you're looking for to run this offense. He's not the ideal quarterback that we all envision Mizzou going after in the portal when it first opened, a proven commodity with 1 year of eligibility left. That's not what Pribula is, but he's intriguing. Like, he's just really intriguing. He can run, he can throw. I don't think he's going to wow you with his arm talent, but he has a strong enough arm. He'll give his playmakers a chance. And I said this on the Power Mizzou board where I'm a member. I'm sure some of you have seen me on there before. But I kind of compared him to a Diego Pavia. He's a gamer. That's just kind of the vibe I get from him. And look at Lenore Sellers at South Carolina. Not saying Beau Pribula is going to become Lenore Sellers, but at the beginning of the year, everyone made fun of South Carolina and Lenore Sellers, saying he can't throw and he's just a running back. And fast forward now, everyone wants a Lenore Sellers, and Lenore Sellers looks like one of the top returning cornerbacks in the SEC next year. Again, not saying Pribula is going to become Lenore Sellers, but he certainly has the physical makings of a guy like that who is mobile, threat to run. You got to account for him taking off. But he has enough. He's enough of a threat throwing the football that you still have to take that seriously, and it makes him hard to defend. So that's why I really like him. But we'll see what happens. I don't see Mizzou bringing him in on a visit unless they miss out on Fernando Mendoza. So that's the first domino that we're all watching right now is Mendoza. We'll see what happens with him. And then we'll look at options like Malik Murphy and Beau Pribula. But that's where we're at right now in Mizzou's search for a transfer portal quarterback, and those are my thoughts on each of them. But I want to hear from you guys down in the comments below. Who do you think Mizzou should bring in to be their next starting quarterback next year? I'm looking forward to hearing from you guys. I want to see if you agree, disagree with me on these options. But with all that being said, make sure you like, share, and subscribe so more Mizzou fans can find this. And make sure you check out my work on showmefootball.com for more. But with all that, I'll see you in the next one. And as always, MIZ.